This week on the For Virginia podcast, we give you the latest updates on the news affecting our state, including local news from around the Commonwealth, updates on McAuliffe's restoration of voting rights, and our main story tonight, the ongoing controversy at the Hampton Roads Regional Jail and inmate deaths. Stay tuned. Let's get started. Thanks and welcome to the For Virginia podcast for the week ending September 3rd, 2016, our Labor Day Hurricane Hermione edition, or more appropriately, Hurricane Hermione. As far as my part of the Commonwealth is concerned, I hope everyone is staying dry this weekend and enjoy your extra day off. I'm your host, Michael Brandon Wade. Thanks for tuning in. For Virginia is a state political action committee focused on supporting progressive causes and candidates at the local and state level. Our purpose with this podcast is to provide you with news and analysis of politics across the state with the goal of helping you get the information you need to stay informed and get involved where you can. Now that we know how the sausage is made, it's time for us to get in the kitchen and start getting things done. As always, we'd like to ask that you go to our website at forvirginia.org, where we'll be posting show notes with links to all of the sources that we reference in the show. We'd also like to hear any feedback that you have on ways we can be better or on issues that you'd like us to focus on. We'll also be kicking off our mailing list soon and are also looking for content producers, people who would like us to publish our news and opinion articles about issues affecting your area of the Commonwealth. If you're a Drupal developer or know how to admin, we could use help working on building out and improving the site. You can email info@forvirginia.org or contact us on Facebook if you're interested in helping out with that. Speaking of Facebook, we would also like to encourage you to share this podcast on social media as much as you can. Like us on Facebook, share the links to the cast or the show notes in order to help us get the word out. And if you like what you're doing and would like to support us, please head over to our ActBlue page and make a donation to help us continue to do what we're doing. Thanks again for your support. Our main story tonight, another inmate death at the Hampton Roads Regional Jail has prompted calls for a Justice Department investigation by Commonwealth Attorney Mark Herring. We've got a lot to cover on that later in the show, but first, we want to give you some quick updates on stories we brought you last week. We told you previously about Petersburg Mayor W. Howard Myers calling out his opponents as racist and Republican supporters at a recent city council meeting following a $12 million budget shortfall in the city's budget. Petersburg is talking about laying off staff, closing museums. They had fire equipment repossessed. They can no longer service city vehicles. And the city council is supposed to be deciding whether or not to shut down a fire department in the city. And obviously the firemen are upset about this and saying that it's going to endanger public health. I just did some searching on Petersburg, and their website came up. It said Petersburg, an engaged community, and I'm guessing they should probably rewrite that and call it an endangered community because of what's going on in there. Petersburg's issues are just a microcosm of what's going on in the state at large. Last week we told you about Terry McAuliffe having a budget shortfall for the state of $1.4 billion. He officially announced that shortfall on Monday to the press and called for state agencies to trim their budgets by 10%. And they have basically until the 20th of September in order to come up with suggestions on how they're going to accomplish that. McAuliffe also reiterated his call to expand Medicaid as a way of shoring up that budget shortfall, which was met with condescension. Senate Majority Leader Tommy Norman out of Williamsburg, who said he admired the governor's persistency on Medicaid expansion, but said that if Virginia had expanded Medicaid, the shortfall would have been exacerbated, which I don't see that that's necessarily true since the federal government is paying for 90% of the Medicaid expansion, which will lower healthcare costs in the state overall. Now, an argument could be made, what happens in 10 years after the feds will no longer pay for all that, but I think that argument is crass, to say the least. This Washington Post article that was published over the week, did point out that McAuliffe has been trying to get all of these economic development deals, 784 economic development deals, and a lot of economists are saying that the jobs that are coming back are not necessarily as good as the jobs that were lost before the recession. There might not be enough of them because automation in factories and in industry doesn't require as many workers as it did before. McAuliffe did note that there are 36,000 high-paying jobs in Virginia that are open because people don't have the right computer and math skills to fill them, which is an education issue that we'll probably talk about later on. His pitch was for workforce development programs, but there's a shortfall. There's going to be budget cuts. McAuliffe wants to raid the rainy day fund, and the GOP does not want to do that. Remains to be seen what will happen, but we'll keep you informed as things develop. We also told you last week about 2 Richmond candidates for local office who had their candidacies up in the air following the Virginia Supreme Court's rejection of McAuliffe's blanket felon rights restoration, both of whom have been cleared by the Richmond Electoral Board. Kevin Starlings, a 3rd District candidate for Richmond School Board, and Michelle Mosby, one of 8 candidates for mayor, are both going to be on the ballot. Mr. Starlings has a felony embezzlement conviction on his record, and he's running for school board. So there you go. Miss Mosby, I believe she was up in the air because some of the requirements for Richmond City districts hinged on a couple people who had their rights restored, and so basically by having the voting rights retroactively taken away from this one person or 2 or 3 people, she no longer met those requirements. But at the time she did, so she's going to be on the ballot. And we're going to talk more about the Richmond mayoral election here in just a moment. I did want to make a quick update about last week's politician who we shamed, Councilman Danny Meeks, who was apparently running up $17,000, $18,000 in taxes and fees. Mr. Meeks announced earlier this year that he would not be running for re-election, citing family. And this is my oh really face. But before we get into this week's shame, it was close between these two. We wanted an update on the restoration of voting rights for felons. Again, we talked a little bit about what was going on in Richmond with that. Quick recap, McAuliffe did a blanket restoration of 200,000 felons who had supposedly served their time. I say supposedly because it turned out a lot of people that were on the list were either active fugitives or not people who should have been on it. So there's a lot of pushback from the Republicans over the cynical nature that this was done, according to them. So the Supreme Court came out and said that McAuliffe exceeded his bounds as governor. They undid all of the restorations, and so McAuliffe has been vowing to do these manually. He's been using an auto pen and released the first 13,000 restorations about a week or 2 ago. So in response to that, the Virginia GOP has decided to put forward a constitutional amendment which would make voting right restorations for non-violent felons automatic, would revoke the ability of any violent felon to get their rights back at all, and would remove the governor's ability to restore anyone. So they're trying to avoid the drama, according to Tommy Norment. But on the other hand, the governor is saying, why should we treat violent and non-violent felons any differently if they've served their time? Now, you may disagree, but I think that the more people we have in the electoral process, the better, whether they're a felon, violent or not, as long as they've served their debt to society, they should be able to vote. And I think the GOP in Virginia, I mean, they think that McAuliffe is doing the registration thing because he wants to bring the extra 13,000 votes for Hillary for the election. I've heard arguments from some talking heads saying that if McAuliffe had waited to restore all these rights until after November 8th, then they wouldn't have had a problem with this. But because of the timing of the way this was laid out, that this is why they're fighting it. As we said last week, maybe they should try to get some of these votes instead of trying to prevent people from voting. VPAP had a interesting analysis that you'll have to look at this image to see, but they looked at the partisan trends in felon voter registration. They wanted to see how much of an effect would restoring the rights of felons have on the outcome of elections. And so what they did is they looked at precincts in which Mitt Romney or Barack Obama received more than 75% of the vote in the 2012 presidential election. They left out any districts that have changed since then. But about 1/3 of these 13,000 felons that McAuliffe just restored rights to are in strongly Democratic neighborhoods, meaning precincts in which Barack Obama received more than 75% of the vote. The number of felons who live in strong-leaning neighborhoods is like 5%, maybe even less. It's 202 out of 13,000. So the 2/3 of them are in less partisan neighborhoods. So you could argue that these 7,800 felons live in swing districts. I mean, 75% is kind of a high. That's 25 to three-quarters of the vote. So not really a swing district. I don't have the raw figures. There's probably some more analysis that could probably be done to see where the number of felons in a neighborhood actually is within the swing, of a neighborhood. But VPAP didn't go into all that. But I will link the image that they put up there. It's very interesting. But in addition to this, not only did Norman get involved with this constitutional amendment that they put forward for the 2017 General Assembly legislative session, they're also suggesting that the Supreme Court of Virginia hold Terry McAuliffe in contempt of court, saying that he blocked the court's order by enacting his widespread reinstatement of felon voting rights. I mean, he's using an auto pen. So what do they want him to do? Sign these one by one? Tommy Norment and Speaker of the House William Howell and Senate Majority Leader Tommy Norment. So that's what's happening in Virginia politics this week. We will keep you informed as always as to what goes on next. This week's shame goes out to Joe Morrissey, current frontrunner in the Richmond mayoral race. This is unbelievable. If you don't know who Joe Morrissey is, I forgive you. It's almost too good to be true. This guy is like the Richmond version of Trump in that he has just been getting away with everything. Actually, I don't know if that's a fair comparison to Trump. It's more like a cross between Trump and Rob Ford. When I tell you this, you're probably not going to believe me that this guy is the current front runner for Richmond mayor. Now, I don't even know if I have enough time to get into this guy's full history. I'll start with the recent news and have to explain it a little bit. So, first off, Morrissey is a current House of Delegates member from the 74th District. He was a Democrat till 2014 when I guess they kicked him out. He's an independent now. But while he was in the delegate chamber in 2013, he pulled an AK-47 from under his desk and flourished it on the House of Delegates floor after a subcommittee had killed a bill that would have tightened gun controls in the Commonwealth on assault weapons. He was disbarred in 2003 for frequent episodes of unethical or otherwise inappropriate conduct during his career as prosecutor and private defense attorney. In 2011, the Supreme Court of Virginia, reinstated him, even though he's still ineligible to practice in federal court. So the big money on this here is that in 2013, he was found in flagrante, I guess, with a 17-year-old girl who was also an employee in his office. They had a grand jury. He was indicted on felony charges, indecent liberties, sexting, so distribution of child pornography, solicitation of a minor, contributing to delinquency is what he finally pled out to. And you have to forgive me if I'm getting some of the timeline on this messed up because it's just crazy. But after somewhere along the lines of being charged with all this and getting sentenced to jail, McAuliffe called for him to resign his seat, which he did in December of 2014, but then there was a special election to fill the vacancy, which he ran for. While he was in prison for 6 months, he won that election to reclaim the seat in the House of Delegates. So, to be fair, he later married Miss Myrna Warren, who's now Myrna Morrissey. She's 20 now, and the couple has 2 kids. Shapiro notes that Morrissey has 5 children by 4 women, but the 2 are married. Apparently, they're happily married. Pictures and campaign ads and everything like that, so nothing to see there. That's where we're at up to now. What has happened this week is that the Virginia State Bar Association has claimed that Morrissey fought the sex scandal with knowingly false evidence, mainly claiming that the child pornography, explicit pictures of the 17-year-old receptionist at his law office that he had on his phone were planted by the girl's ex-lover. It's just, I'm telling you, it's crazy. So while all this has happened up till now, these revelations that the state bar is trying to disbar him for the second time is also accompanied this week by news that Morrissey is in the lead for the Richmond mayor slot. 28% of an 8-person field, according to a Christopher Newport University poll that came out on Tuesday. The next closest person is 16%, Jack Berry, who is Venture Richmond director. So now, of course, the Richmond business establishment is going insane with the thought that this guy might actually be the mayor. I mean, it is kind of ridiculous. But we have a similar situation to how Trump got the nomination for the GOP. There was just so many people in the field, nobody could break his 25% lead, and there he was. So Morrissey, in this case, has name recognition as delegate. There's no such thing as bad press, right? So his name's out there, everybody knows who he is, and whether there's a runoff or not, it's looking like this guy is going to be Richmond's mayor. It's insane. So I don't know whether to shame Joe Morrissey for being the way he is, or shaming Richmond for having this guy in the lead for mayor. They're trying to figure out who of these other 7 people are going to fall on their sword to try and get him out of there. But I don't know. We've got, 60 days till November 8th, so it's going to be interesting to see how it turns out, and who knows? That's our shame for the week. Joe Morrissey, congratulations. This is the For Virginia podcast. We'll be right back with discussion about the Hampton Roads Regional Jail mistreating inmates. Several deaths this year. We'll be right back. For Virginia podcast. Welcome back. You're listening to the For Virginia podcast for the week ending 9/3, September 3rd, Labor Day weekend. So, funny story, just real quick before we continue. I record these podcasts over the course of a day, or multiple days sometime, and I found out earlier, after I recorded the first segment where I made fun of the weather, that Hurricane Hermione actually caused a tree to fall down in my yard, so I guess I'm being mocked by karma or something. Moving on, we try to keep things light on this show because a lot of stuff we talk about is really kind of depressing, including this next segment, so you're warned. I wanted to talk about this subject for a while. I've been very outspoken about it on Facebook, but a couple things have happened which make it a good subject for this week to talk about. The Hampton Roads Regional Jail is a consortium of several cities in the Hampton Roads areas that kind of pulled prisoners together. And they've had a lot of controversy going on in their system. Jamichael Mitchell died 1 year ago on August 14th, 2015, while being held in the jail. Mitchell, a 24-year-old man, was arrested for shoplifting approximately $5 worth of junk food from a Portsmouth 7-Eleven. He was found dead weeks later. The young man, with a history of mental illness, was denied access to his family, or rather his family was denied access to them, because he had not filled out their names on a list of approved visitors. Mitchell had a history of bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, and a Portsmouth General District Court ordered him to be transferred to Eastern State Hospital for psychiatric evaluation. The paperwork for that order wound up lost in a drawer while Mitchell basically wasted away and died. 90 days after the Portsmouth District Court ordered him transferred for psychiatric evaluation, Mitchell died. According to the Virginian Pilot on last December, the autopsy claimed that Mitchell died of heart problems caused by wasting syndrome, which means he lost more than 10% of his original body weight. According to his family, he was a 180-pound, 140-pound man who weighed less than 90 pounds at the time of his death. Witnesses in the jail said that he spent his last days, quote, alone in a cell with feces on the walls and urine on the floor. It's just deplorable. And there's been several reports, watchdog agencies, oversight review boards, and all this other stuff. But as the pilot calls it, catastrophic bureaucratic failure, a series of mistakes made by a number of actors operating on behalf of several agencies. I mean, this is the whole reason that we need transparency in government, is because there's so much obfuscation about what actually happened there that no one knows why. Somebody lost some paperwork in a desk. Right. So that's one thing, but how does that happen to a person? And if that wasn't tragic enough, we found out just this week that it happened again at the same jail. Henry Stewart died at the jail this August after filing a number of emergency grievances asking for medical help. The last one 2 days before he died. Stewart was 60, was locked up for violating probation on a shoplifting charge, made written requests begging for medical help, was denied. Pilot also claims that they have received calls from loved ones of other people who are currently serving time at the jail who are claiming that inmates are not receiving proper medical attention, proper medication, rather. And check this, no state agency claims responsibility for investigating the actions of regional jails or of medical providers for those jails. They're overseen by superintendents who are appointed by boards of local officials. And we'll get to those guys in a minute, because I want you guys to know who actually is in charge of these jails. They're your mayors, your city council people, your city superintendents. Nobody's taking responsibility for Jamichael Mitchell's death. Meanwhile, Henry Stewart befalls the same fate. The jail investigated itself and found no wrongdoing. Imagine that. The Portsmouth police investigated and found no evidence of wrongdoing. The state police are investigating why Jamichael Mitchell lost 46 pounds over around 3 months in the jail. 46 pounds. That's a hell of a diet. The Office of the State Inspector General looked into it, but said they lacked authority to investigate. Whether that was a cop-out or not remains to be seen, but again, until the General Assembly does something about it, then nobody really has to take responsibility for it. Nobody cares what happened. So on top of all this, there's actually surveillance from outside Mitchell's cell, which didn't exist. Then they said they did have it, but wouldn't release it. Apparently an AP reporter has seen it, but they're not putting it out to the public, obviously, because they know the storm that would occur because of that. And as if all this stuff about the Hampton Roads Regional Jail wasn't bad enough, it gets better. Eastern State Hospital in James City County, which is a mental health facility has lost its Medicaid funding because of poor record keeping, staffing shortfalls, and policies that allow patients to skip required activities, according to the Daily Press. So they're going to lose $700,000 per year, which, amazingly enough, is only 1% of their operating budget. But, they don't want to do anything about guns. The Virginia Tech shooting was a mental health issue. But have they done anything about mental health funding or the state of mental health facilities in the Commonwealth? No. Maybe Kane, as vice president, will be able to do something about it since he was governor during the Virginia Tech massacre. I mean, these issues are just so infuriating. I have people in my family that work in mental health, and they will tell you what kind of horrible job it is really to have to deal with people who have bipolar disorder or some of these other syndromes. I mean, it's a horrible job. I mean, horrible in the sense that it's thankless, I guess, because the people that you're treating sometimes, don't appreciate what you're doing for them, and it's a very hard job. My heart goes out to all the people that are doing this. So obviously not all of the problem is management or budget, but there's a serious shortage of trained staff that can take care of these kind of issues. And Jamichael Mitchell, stuff going on at Eastern State, at the jails, and the fact that no one will take responsibility for what's going on there. It's just amazing. It's incredible, and not in a good way. Eastern State was first notified of their issues in June 2015. 3 problems. They took care of 2 of them by September 17th of 2015. But then they've had 4 visits about these problems, and boom, they're out. So Medicaid funding gone, and it's not like that's going to make things better over there. So, but somebody's got to step up and take responsibility for this. And I tell you who we ought to hold accountable for this in the meantime. Now, Mark Herring, the Attorney General of Virginia, has called for the Justice Department to investigate the Hampton Roads Regional Jail. Apparently, nobody at the state level actually wants to take responsibility for what's been going on there. So, hey, let's call in the feds. It worked in Ferguson, right? Bobby Scott, Senator, not senator yet. He wants to be, I'm sure. But Bobby Scott put out a statement last week as well in support of Herring's call for Justice Department involvement in the case. But the people that we should be holding accountable for this issue are the people who are the board members of the Hampton Roads Regional Jail. And this is the most amazing part of this. So the web page for the jail actually has a link to the board members. So I'll tell you a couple of them. City of Chesapeake, City of Hampton, City of Newport News, City of Norfolk, and Portsmouth are all involved. So David Simmons, who's the superintendent, I don't know who he is, but he's responsible to all these other people. There's several open slots, but Chesapeake City Council member Robert Ike, City of Hampton Council member Chris Sneed, Donnie Tuck, who's now the mayor, BJ Roberts, the sheriff, City of Newport News Councilman Robert Coleman, City of Norfolk Councilman Andrew Protagiru, probably not saying that right, Robert McCabe, who's the sheriff of Norfolk, City of Portsmouth, Curtis Edmonds, William Watson, who's the sheriff, William Rucker, John Rowe, J. Brandon Godfrey. These people who are on the board of this organization are the ones who should be held responsible for what goes on there. The board members and the superintendent, David Simons. Those are the people we should be holding responsible. And it's time to tell them that we do. For Jamichael Mitchell, and for Henry Stewart, and for everyone else who's been held there. And to make matters worse, and I don't know if this is because of the recent elections that happened in March and all the other changes in local government in the past few months, but if you go to the Hampton Roads Regional Jail website right now and click on the page for their board members, you know what you'll get? A blank page. I don't know if it's intentional. I think it probably is, because none of these people want to have their names out there associated with this jail. Not the sheriff of Newport News, Gabriel Morgan, sheriff of Chesapeake, Jim O'Sullivan, Robert McCabe, sheriff of Norfolk, William Watson, sheriff of Portsmouth, Not the mayor of Hampton, Donnie Tuck. Council members of Chesapeake like Robert Ike, Newport News, Robert Coleman. None of these people want to have their names out there associated with this cluster of mismanagement and dearth of responsibility that's been going on over there. It's amazing. And I don't want to forget to mention this. I promised someone, thank you, Michael Rao. I don't even have a name of this person because the hospital in question in this case is refusing to release any identifying information of the person involved because of federal privacy protections, or HIPAA as they're called. But a woman died within 24 hours of admission to the state hospital, Central State Hospital, within 24 hours of admission. They don't know what happened to her. She didn't commit suicide. She was jailed on a trespassing misdemeanor charge. They don't know how long she was in custody. They do know that she was in crisis, and they delayed transporting her from, again, the Hampton Roads Regional Jail in Portsmouth to Petersburg at the Central State Hospital. And nobody knows what happened. Now, according to this article from Richmond Times Dispatch, 90 people, patients at state mental hospitals, have died over the past 4 years. Now, obviously, we don't know if any of that is due to old age or natural causes, but again, transparency in government. We don't have it. State officials delay freedom of information requests every way they can. Daily Press has written tons about this over the past few months that I've seen. So, again, what do we do about it? What do we do? I don't really have any solutions at this point other than to get the information out to people and let you guys talk about it. I know some people know about Jamichael Mitchell. Henry Stewart is too new for most people to know about. But, these unknown people at Central State, nobody knows about. Most people don't care. A lot of people that I've talked to just have the idea of like, oh, you shouldn't get arrested. You shouldn't be shoplifting. You wouldn't be in jail, And it's just amazing to me. Just amazing. Compassion, empathy, just missing from so many people that I talk to sometimes. It just makes me just sick. And I wish I could end things on a lighter note. But, really, this riles me up, and I want you to be riled up about it as well. Because the only way that things are going to change is if we raise hell, raise the stink, go out to city council meetings, call our representatives, and tell them that this won't fly. Until we do that, we're just going to keep reading about it in the newspaper, on our computer screens, and just clicking likes on Facebook with little frowny faces. So, I'm putting it on you. And I wish I had a better segue out of that, but this is the For Virginia podcast. My name is Michael Brandon Wade. We'll be right back with our final word. I just want to close things out with a recognition of Labor Day. Enjoy your 3-day weekend the same way you enjoy your 8-hour workday, 40-hour work week, paid sick leave, holidays, vacations, overtime pay, minimum wage, child labor laws, family medical leave, unemployment insurance, health insurance, Social Security, and work breaks. We owe all of these things to unions, and I bring all this up just to remind you that this November, Virginians will be voting on what they call the Right to Work Amendment, what should be more accurately termed Right to Work for Less. It is basically a way for Republicans to starve unions out of existence, as they have been trying to do for decades. We've got more information about it on the Stop Right to Work for Less in Virginia Facebook page, why unions are important, why worker protections are important, and why this law is bad for Virginia, and why it's even a worse idea to enshrine it in the Virginia Constitution. That's all the time we have for this week. We appreciate everyone that's tuned in. Thank you for your support and for all your shares. Please check our website, share on social media, and your financial support is always appreciated. This is the For Virginia podcast, episode 5. Please submit your feedback on our website, on Facebook, or by emailing info@forvirginia.org. We'll continue working hard to bring you the news, information, and analysis to help keep the progressive revolution moving forward in Virginia through 2017. My name is Michael Brandon Wade. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.